Last year, I went on honeymoon to Japan and I was really missing it, so today we're making Halal Shio Ramen with Ajitsuke Tamago, also known as Ramen Eggs. We have to start this the night before so everything has time to marinate correctly. The first thing we have to do is make dashi, which is like a seafood umami broth. To do that, we're going to pour 12.5 cups of water into a big pot or Dutch oven, along with 2/3 of an ounce of kombu, also known as dried seaweed, 2/3 of an ounce of dried anchovies, 2/3 an ounce of dried shiitake mushrooms. Then we'll give it a stir and let that cold brew in the fridge overnight. Next, we'll make our Ajitsuke Tamago, also known as the ramen egg. We'll pour half a cup of low-sodium soy sauce into a pan, a tablespoon and a half of sugar, and a half a cup of water. A lot of authentic Japanese cooking uses sake and mirin, which we can't use when we're making a halal version of these foods. So I did some Googling for recommendations, and I found that sake can be left out entirely and the mirin can be replaced with a little extra sugar. The version of the recipe that I made accounts for that extra sugar. Once the sugar is dissolved, we'll pull it off the heat and let it cool. Now we'll gently drop 5 eggs into a pot of boiling water and let that cook for around 7 minutes. Cooking it this long helps to make sure that the yolk gets just a little bit jammy. Just before the timer's up, we'll make an ice bath. Let those rest in the bath for about 15 minutes. After that, we'll crack the shell of the egg on the rim of the mixing bowl and peel the shell off. Once the shells are all removed, we'll put the eggs in a Ziploc, cover with our marinade, and refrigerate that overnight as well. Surprise! It's the next day and it's time to prep the flavorings for the ramen broth. We'll bring in a couple of green onions and a 2-inch knob of ginger. We'll slice that into several pieces. I made mine about a 1/4 inch thick or so. Now we gotta prep the green onions. We'll be cutting these into 4 separate pieces based on the use case. The first section is the white and light green section. The second is the Y-shaped divide. The third is the regular green, and the fourth is the dark green section. We'll remove the root end, make the appropriate cuts, and place those into piles for later. Once those are separated, you'll be able to more easily tell the different sections apart by the color. If you have any outer layers on the white section, peel those off now. Time for the big reveal! Our cold brew dashi is looking good and smelling questionable, and just to be clear, this is totally normal. It'll get less intense as we add the extra seasonings. We'll remove about a cup of the dashi now. That'll be used to make our tare, or the seasoning, later. Now we're going to make the dashi into the ramen broth by seasoning it. We'll add in our Y-shaped green onion pieces, toss those in along with half of the dark green sections, toss in the ginger, gently add in 2 pounds of Midamar's ground chicken, available at the link below. And if this is your first time ordering from us, use code YTV10 to get $10 off your first order. We want to break the ground chicken up and stir it all around as it cooks. Now we'll turn the heat up so we can get this boiling. Just when you start to notice some small bubbles coming at the top, we'll want to remove the kombu. I read on just one cookbook that letting the kombu boil can cause it to be bitter and get slimy, so don't do that. Now we'll cover that so it starts to simmer a little more quickly. We want it to be a light simmer, not too strong. Lower your heat a little bit, then we'll let that simmer uncovered for 30 minutes. After that's had some time to simmer, we'll add in 2/3 an ounce or about a cup of katsuobushi, aka bonito flakes. I decided to put the bonito flakes in a fine mesh strainer and let that cook. This way it'll be really easy to remove later. Once the bonito flakes are in there, we'll let that very lightly simmer for about 30 seconds or so. The longer you leave it in, the stronger the smoky umami flavor will be imparted into our broth. Take the broth off the heat and let that steep for about 10 minutes with the bonito flakes. We'll start by dumping out the bonito, then we'll pluck out the anchovies, green onions, ginger, and the shiitakes. I recommend plucking out as much as you can now because it's a little easier to sift through the chicken while it's in the liquid. But you won't be able to get it all. And that's okay though, because we're going to remove the chicken with a slotted spoon and set it in its own mixing bowl. Once we've saved as much chicken as possible, we'll set aside our trash bowl and bring in a big old mixing bowl with a spout. Top it with the fine mesh strainer that's been cleaned and pour our ramen broth through that. We're going to show you how to use that ground chicken next week, so be sure to hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and come back next week if you want to see how to use that chicken. Toss your ramen broth back in the Dutch oven for now while we prepare some chicken chashu. Pour 4 cups of water into the pot, 1 tablespoon of iodized salt, and around 3/4 of a tablespoon of freshly cracked black pepper. Whisk that up so the salt is all dissolved, then we'll place 1 package of Midamar's Halal chicken breast into the pot. Again, you can buy this for yourself from our link in the description. Make sure you use code YTV10 if it's your first time. Turn your heat on, bring that to a boil, and let it cook for about 25 minutes or until a meat thermometer reads 160 degrees at the thickest point. And while that cooks, we'll head back over to the green onions, which is coming in with a little buddy, 5 small cloves of garlic. Here we're preparing the aroma oil. This is not only a vital ingredient for the ramen, but also ended up being my favorite part of this entire dish. We'll start by cutting the remaining dark green parts of the onion into thin strips. Next, on the white part of the onion, we'll cut into the first layer and peel that off and save it for later. Cut the remaining core of the green onion into thin strips and then finely dice those. And lastly, we'll dice up the garlic. Take the remaining green onion that we peeled off a moment ago and cut those into thin strips. We'll let those rest in a small bowl of water for a few minutes just to remove any bitterness. Next, we'll slice the root off another green onion and then slice the whole thing into thin round bits. Mine were probably around 1/8 of an inch thick, which makes for a really nice topping. Now that our aromatics and toppings are all prepped, we'll set them aside and check up on the chicken. And look at that, it's cooked! Remove them to a plate, cover with a few tablespoons of the cooking liquid, then we'll cover it with plastic wrap and let that rest. Aroma oil is next up. We're going to come in with half a cup of peanut oil or your favorite neutral flavored oil. Get that warmed up in a pan so it moves sort of like water, then we'll bring in our garlic and green onions. Now we'll cook that until the garlic and onions are really browned. Strain the cooked veggies through a fine mesh strainer and set that aside for a while. And now it's Shio Tare time! We'll add in the 1 cup of dashi that we reserved from earlier, an 1/8 cup of salt. We won't be using mirin, so we'll replace that with 2 tablespoons of sugar, 1 tablespoon of low sodium soy sauce, and an 1/8 teaspoon of fish sauce. We'll bring that to a boil, then reduce the heat so it gently simmers for about 5 minutes. Once that 5 minutes is up, we'll add in about a half a cup of katsuobushi, that's the bonito flakes. Let that cook for 30 seconds, then we'll take that off the heat and steep for 10 minutes. And while that steeps, we'll yoink our chicken breast off the plate and hit it with a butane torch. Normally I'd say this is optional, but the controlled char on the chicken was delicious. If you don't have a torch or are worried about burning your house down like I used to be, you can toss these in a broiler for a few minutes and get a sort of similar effect. Let the chicken cool a little bit, then chop those into hearty slices and set them aside. Now that the tare has steeped, we'll pour it through a fine mesh strainer to get all the bonito flakes out and set that aside for now. Grab your ramen eggs and cut them in half. A cheese wire worked really well for this, but a knife will also work. Just make sure you wipe down the wire or the knife after each cut to make sure the eggs have a nice smooth surface. As you'd probably imagine, we also need to prep some ramen noodles. These can be surprisingly difficult to find if you're looking for just the raw noodle. I had good luck in the freezer section at my local Asian grocery store, but if you can't find those, just pull the noodles from your favorite instant ramen instead. After several hours, we're ready for some authentic, homemade halal ramen. Into your ramen bowl, put 2 tablespoons of the shio tare, 1 teaspoon of the aroma oil, or more if you'd like. I ended up using about 2 to 3 teaspoons. Add in the drained ramen, pour in several ladlefuls of the ramen broth, then we'll place some menma, aka seasoned bamboo shoots, a few tablespoons of snowpack organic corn, also available at the link in the description, the sliced green onion that we rested in the water, the ramen eggs, the chicken chashu, and we'll finish it with the diced green onions. And that's all there is to it. I was extremely proud of how this turned out. This ramen was incredible and it reminded me of the trip my wife and I took. And if you made it this far, don't forget to like, subscribe, and come back next week to find out how we use that ground chicken.